Good evening, everyone. I'm always hesitant and cautious while collecting my thoughts from various readings. I wonder about the dangers of divulging any esoteric knowledge that the ancient authors had explicitly sworn to secrecy and silence. In fact, many alchemists have expressed the prohibition of disclosure on pain of divine retribution. I also realize there is a transgression that is being committed, an unveiling of sorts, but I wish for this unveiling to take part by you on an individual level, rather than didactically from me. But I'm also aware that my words are only the beginning of the journey. If you truly want this knowledge, you must go to the sources. The intention of this channel is to show you the path to deeper realizations of nature and the cosmos. The work can only be done alone. A guide can only show the direction and the methods. But I'm not naive to the fact that we live in a world and an age characterized by the Sanskrit expression chittavritti, the monkey mind. The mind that bounces and jumps from one thought to the next, from one sensation to the other, all the while engaging in one sense perception while simultaneously thinking of 6 other thought forms. This is a world of distraction and distracted beings. To truly sit with something and pay your absolute, undivided attention to it, and keep it in your perception for longer than half a millisecond, is indeed a Herculean feat. Our world discourages it. The less you can fixate on one thing and give your full attention to it, not just in the sense of intellect, but mind, the more you are at the mercy of others, the more you can be controlled, whether gently or forcefully cajoled into the paths that are preset and determined for you in advance, rather than you yourself allowing your path to be directed by your Lord and angelic alterity. I do also firmly believe that this sense of secrecy and esotericism should be imparted, at least, at some place or at some time, as a last dying gasp, before humanity descends further into darkness and unconsciousness, and we lose the subtle expressions of reality that have already been covered over for 2,500 years of misunderstandings upon misunderstandings and misinterpretations built upon misinterpretations. Make no mistake, we are heading towards the most cataclysmic period in the history of humanity. Progress has been a delusion of modernity since the high medieval scholasticism, then humanism, and then the 18th century Enlightenment. These were the expressions of a logical inheritance from the Christian tradition that slowly eroded its own sense of a transcendent dimension and began to secularize into a fully immanent dimension, whereby the natural state of Gnosticism, which predates Christianity, transformed from an apperception of true knowledge to that of its most functional and utilitarian uses. Christianity opened up the link between the telos of the heavenly spiritual plane with the material and earthly. When God was incarnated as man in Christ, the eschatology entered the realm of history. History, in the sense of our modern conception of it, in a linear sense, was born. This horizontal understanding of history slowly eroded the vertical understanding of history, a transhistory. Our entire civilization, and the civilizations that have been influenced by Western modes of thinking, which in a globalist system is nearly every other nation at this point, view the visible world and its quantifiability as all there is to know, completely disregarding the subtle states of matter and true gnosis, marifa. Humans have a will to power. Power, if one observes it in its true aspect, is absolutely necessary for all beings to both survive and thrive. To assert ourselves in the world is to require power. We mustn't be bogged down and confused that somehow the exercise of power is in itself evil. Power, like technology, can have the capacity for both good and evil. In fact, it is neither good nor evil. Its expression in the world is a product of how we yield it. But human will, without the cooperation of the divine will, Human power without the acknowledgement and mutual play of divine power, like the power of the cosmos expressed in the goddess Shakti, will only result in further destruction. Nature rejoices in nature. Nature subdues nature. Nature rules over nature. When humans interfere, forgetting their true nature, whether through exploitation of their environment or through egomaniacal ambitions and wonderful thoughts of saving the planet and all its creatures, our efforts result in the same diabolical control and ego inflation that destroys absolutely everything it touches. If left alone, nature and the cosmos heal themselves. We are such megalomaniacs to believe that the ego is at the center of the world. We can also be so deluded and self-deceptive in the belief that we are doing something for noble and selfless purposes while we secretly bask in our own self-aggrandizement. The culmination of Jung's magnum opus, his individuation process, was not about exercising or strengthening individualism. It had nothing to do with the asserting the I or the ego. In the Red Book, and veiled throughout his collected works, is the notion that the ego and soul are to be ground down into dust. Through an excruciating process of sublimation, distillation, coagule et solve, the ego and soul are to be mortified, trampled upon, crushed, ridiculed, and debased. It is only through the lowliest and most dejected states that we can endure beyond enduring, that we can attain the highest of the high. This is a core teaching of the fifth sutra, that is, Tantra. This antinomianism is also apparent in Lurianic Kabbalah. What is low is the most high. To truly delve into magic is to absolutely disappear. If your ego is still attached to worldly ambitions and materiality, you feed the devils that rip you apart in your unconsciousness and complexes. If you polish the mirror of your soul ceaselessly, letting every blemish or imperfection in the glass wear away through friction until all is reflected in the light of your divine double, then you can truly perceive your true self, your Fravashi, your guiding light in a state of inseparable bi-unity. If you think I'm being a pessimist, this is all well and good. Pessimism and optimism are psychological states that occur in a world of duality, in a world of manifestation. You can be pessimistic about some things while optimistic about others, but ultimately all things exist in a cyclical manner. And your subjective impression, with its own biases and presuppositions about the nature of reality and the unfolding of the dark and murky future, is your business. Ultimately, when you dig deeper inside yourself, you'll notice, as Jung did, that the subjective eventually hits a foundation in the psyche that is purely objective, because it speaks to humanity as a whole, in an archetypal level, the anthropos. To reach a state of samadhi, away from a state of dvandva or opposition, is to go beyond simple dichotomies that characterize the human psyche and the human condition. al-Qudat expressed the Gnostic sentiment on the path to mystical death in the approaching of the divine, that even hope itself must be abandoned. To truly enter a state of mystical death is to excise a sense of hope, a hope for the future, a hope for salvation, a hope for anything. The opposite of hope is not despair, because if you find yourself despairing at the world, you secretly are still clinging on to a hope. This is a very unchristian thing to say. As Tolkien characterizes throughout his Lord of the Rings trilogy, to lose hope is a sin. Ultimately, because the creature loses confidence in the creator. But this is precisely not what we are suggesting, because once again that is despair. When hope is gone, you release your clutching and grasping of the ego onto something solid, and that is precisely the time when all things are stilled and all willing ceases, that the divine will takes over and carries you where you need to go. Take care for now.